There's been a lot of talk about loot boxes and regulation lately, thanks in no small part to Star Wars Battlefront 2 and the worldwide uproar it caused, especially in the political sphere. And while the ESRB has done nothing to step in and stop politicians from potentially regulating the game industry, at least Apple seems to see what's on the horizon and has taken it upon itself to at least begin some sort of self-regulation. This week Apple updated its App Store guidelines for those wishing to put their games on iOS. And among the updates is a note about in-app purchases with various rules on what you should and shouldn't do. The bit that is of course interesting to us is the last note. Apps offering loot boxes or other mechanisms that provide randomized virtual items for purchase must disclose the odds of receiving each type of item to customers prior to purchase. Basically, iOS games with loot boxes now have to tell their audiences what the exact chances are of them getting the items inside said boxes. Unlike the glorified gambling games you'll see on console and PC at the moment, games with loot boxes on Apple's devices are going to have to be upfront and disclose the odds. It's not a particularly detailed guideline and it's open to interpretation, which of course means it's open to loopholes. The very concept of virtual currency is itself a license to abuse loopholes. This is something Activision Blizzard demonstrated when China as a country implemented a similar rule, stating that games with loot boxes have to disclose their odds. Now, for some reason, Activision Blizzard didn't want to disclose the odds in Overwatch. I wonder why. Their response was to skirt around the whole thing by selling the currency to players via money and giving away the loot boxes as free items with purchases of the currency. And Overwatch only works that way in China, so Activision Blizzard knows exactly what it's fucking doing. But that's how virtual currency can be used by publishers to ease their way through tight little loopholes. The lubricant with which they can slip and slide like slippery slidey things. And of course it's not like disclosing the odds is some massive victory or anything that's going to kill loot boxes forever. Personally, I'm more interested in publishers just being fucking accountable for them, and at least this is a step in that direction. By disclosing the odds, the inherent mystery of loot boxes is diminished somewhat, their allure tarnished. And it may help contextualize for some people what a waste of money a loot box can be. By telling people their exact chances of getting rare items in said boxes, a loot box inherently becomes a touch less appealing. Companies know this, companies don't like this. If companies didn't give a shit about disclosing the odds of loot boxes, then Activision Blizzard wouldn't have performed the fucking acrobatics it did to get away with selling the loot boxes in China under the guise of free gifts. Like I say, this isn't going to kill off loot boxes. Cigarettes have to tell you on the box that they're going to fucking kill you and people will happily smoke them. I know what's going to happen to me if I eat the heart attack special at Pig O'Houlihan's Tubby Kitchen. I'll get a heart attack, but I'm going to eat it because I don't know what's good for me. But it's an inconvenience to those companies that want to use loot boxes, and while it's not outright decimation, it is diminishment, and I'll happily take that. It's a good start at the very least. And it's also a sign that the industry, at least in certain sectors, is taking this so-called loot box controversy quite seriously, which again we've got to thank Electronic Arts for. Had it not fucked up so tremendously, so gloriously, so majestically with Star Wars Battlefront 2, I don't think the industry would be anywhere near as nervous as it is right now around the concept of loot boxes. I was expecting this shit to happen, but I thought it would take years, not months. But it just goes to show you cannot ever underestimate EA's ability to fuck things up for everybody. Whether or not Apple will be good at enforcing this policy, or if it'll even bother to enforce the policy at all, remains to be seen. The App Store is about as well regulated as Steam, so don't go crossing your fingers or holding your breath. But even if the results are minimal, barely noticeable, the fact that Apple is a little bit worried and has taken to at least putting on the appearance of self-regulation is, as I say, a good start. You see, while some are pushing for actual legislation, that's not really my personal end game. If that's what has to happen in the end, then so be it. But frankly, I'm sick of the fucking video game industry being allowed to run rampant and do what it likes with no oversights, no checks, no balances. And it's about time their feet were held to the fire in some way, shape or form for so consistently and so constantly preying upon their own fucking audiences like hungry wolves. Anything that makes loot boxes slightly less convenient for companies is a win in my book. Because as it stands, loot boxes are a very easy, lazy way to make a lot of fucking money in a short amount of time. And these fucking predators are going to be severely defanged as soon as publishers are going to have to start putting some goddamn effort into them. So as it stands, don't expect this particular in-app purchase rule from Apple to have much of a massive impact on its own. But it does have the potential to be the proverbial flap of the butterfly's wing causing a tornado in Texas or whatever it was it said on that poster in my math classroom when I was a kid. I mean, we all know that theory is bollocks anyway, but you get the point. You know what I'm talking about.